So you've achieved source control mastery. Your code is clean, your pipelines are humming, and everything is greenlit, ready for prime time.
Right.
But now you face the biggest infrastructure decision of all. Where do you actually put it?
Mm,
We are officially moving beyond the Git repository and launching this deep dive straight into the ultimate cloud showdown.
that's absolutely the right pivot point. I mean, for you, the listener, whether you're trying to deploy a certified application or even just deciding where to host GitLab runners.
Yeah, those ephemeral resources.
Exactly. The choice between Amazon Web Services, AWS, and Microsoft Azure is the defining decision in 2025.
Our goal today is to just cut through all the marketing noise, the overwhelming acronyms. This deep dive is about giving you the critical knowledge.
The architectural, strategic, and financial differences.
Right, so you can make an informed choice, and quickly. We've synthesized everything from market trend analysis, architectural papers, and of course, a deep look into the pricing.
The part that can save or sink a budget.
Let's start with philosophy.
Okay. So when you peel back the layers, you find that these two giants, they represent fundamentally different approaches to delivering a cloud infrastructure.
Oh, so.
Well, AWS, they're the undisputed first mover. They literally created this market.
They did.
And that deep history, it translates into the most comprehensive, most mature, and frankly, the most granular set of building blocks available anywhere.
And when you say granular, I think that really defines their customer base. They're the natural habitat for startups, right? For tech innovators.
Yeah, any organization whose priority is just raw scalability, flexibility, and building bespoke solutions from the ground up.
So you get all the pieces and you build the exact house you want.
Precisely. They offer immense freedom, but that comes with an inherent complexity.
And on the other side.
You have Microsoft Azure, which we characterize as the enterprise giant.
Okay.
Azure's sweet spot is, it's immediate and obvious. Organizations that are already deeply entrenched in the Microsoft ecosystem.
So we're talking about firms running Active Directory, relying on Office 365, with huge investments in Windows Server licensing.
Exactly. Azure is designed to make that migration path feel less like a quantum leap and more like a gentle ramp. It's integration first.
That makes sense. The design language, the tooling, it all feels familiar to IT pros who grew up in that Microsoft stack.
It does. It prioritizes making the enterprise transition seamless. But what's truly fascinating is how this battle is playing out today.
The gap is closing, I've read.
It's closing fast.
Give us the numbers to ground this. Where do they stand right now in this contest?
So AWS still holds the top spot. They control around 31% of the global cloud market share.
31%.
Yeah, and that established lead gives them a huge advantage in service breadth and community support. However, Azure is right on their heels, hovering around 25%.
And they're growing faster.
That's the key takeaway. Azure is consistently noted as the fastest growing platform of the two, mainly by converting those legacy enterprise customers.
That rivalry is a massive benefit for us, the consumers. But I want to jump into the technical side because the sheer volume of acronyms is just staggering.
Oh, it is.
If you're coming from one cloud and trying to talk to someone on the other, it's like two separate languages. We need to translate the core building blocks.
That is essential. We have to map the terminology because while the names are different, the foundational concepts are often identical. Let's match them up, starting with compute.
The virtual machines, the fundamental engine of the cloud.
Right. On AWS, you have the Elastic Compute Cloud, or EC2.
EC2.
On Azure, the equivalent is simply called Azure Virtual Machines.
Okay, so a much more descriptive name.
It is. It immediately signals its purpose to an IT manager, while AWS uses more technical, trademarked acronym that implies elasticity, programmability.
Which, again, mirrors that philosophical split we just talked about.
It does.
What about storage? Because that's where the cost structure gets interesting and where so much data lives.
For resilient, scalable object storage, the absolute foundation AWS offers S3, the simple storage service.
And S3 is more than just storage, it's the industry standard.
It is a global standard. Its ubiquity means almost every tool, every integration, every piece of cloud-native architecture just assumes S3 compatibility.
And Azure's counterpart.
Azure's direct counterpart is Azure Blob Storage.
Now, I remember reading S3 is known for eventual consistency in some cases. It focuses on scale over immediate consistency. Does blob storage approach that differently?
That's a great point. While both are incredibly resilient, Azure Blob Storage often provides slightly stronger consistency guarantees right out of the box.
Leaning into that enterprise need for strict data integrity.
Exactly. But S3's sheer scale and its decades of third-party integrations, I mean, that gives it an undeniable lead in market penetration. For most startups, you need object storage. You think S3 first.
Okay, let's talk connectivity.
Yeah.
Building that secure private network environment in the cloud.
Networking. So AWS utilizes the VPC or virtual private cloud.
And Azure.
Azure calls this the VNet, or virtual network. Again, same core concept, segmenting a private network within the public cloud.
But with those same philosophical differences, I assume.
For sure. VNet often feels more integrated with enterprise identity tools from the start, while VPC gives you slightly more granular control over routing tables and subnets. The building block approach.
Finally, we have to touch on serverless. The path to massive scale without managing infrastructure.
That's the face-off between AWS Lambda and Azure Functions. Both are event-driven, but there are nuanced differences. For instance, Lambda has historically had a reputation for cold starts.
That latency when a function runs for the first time in a while.
Right, though AWS has worked very hard to mitigate this.
And how do Azure Functions handle that in comparison?
Azure Functions, especially on their dedicated plans, can sometimes offer more predictable latency. They're built to integrate really seamlessly with tools like Azure Event Grid and Service Bus.
But Lambda has the deeper integration into the AWS ecosystem itself.
Without a doubt, it has triggers and connectivity to virtually every service AWS offers.
So we've got the architecture down. AWS is the granular tool set, Azure is the integrated environment. But where those differences really materialize is when the CTO opens the budget sheet. Before we get to pure pricing, though, we have to acknowledge a huge strategic differentiator: hybrid.
Yes, this is a major area of divergence. For large enterprises, especially in regulated industries, moving everything to the public cloud overnight is a non-starter.
They need that bridge, on-prem to cloud.
They do. And this is where Azure has aggressively positioned itself as the leader.
With tools like Azure Arc and Azure Stack.
Absolutely. Azure Arc is arguably the stronger offering. It lets you manage and run Azure services data, machine learning, security across any infrastructure.
Any infrastructure, so local data centers, edge devices.
And even competing clouds.
Wow, wait, running Azure services on another cloud? That's aggressive.
It is a phenomenal strategic play. It extends Azure's management plane everywhere.
So how does AWS counter that? They have AWS Outposts.
They do, and Outposts is powerful. It brings AWS infrastructure, the actual hardware, directly into your data center. But Azure's approach with Arc is seen as more flexible, more software-defined.
That makes the choice framework a lot clearer for some organizations right there. Okay, let's talk pure dollars and cents. The unexpected costs and savings.
The first thing to know is the complexity. Both platforms want to maximize consumption, so you have to watch things like egress fees. But AWS really popularized the per-second billing model.
Maximum granularity.
Right, and for long-term commitments, they offer savings plans.
And these are lauded for their flexibility, correct?
They are. Instead of committing to a specific instance type in a specific region, you just commit to a dollar amount of compute per hour over 1 or 3 years.
So you can switch between instance families or even from EC2 to Fargate.
As long as you meet that hourly spend, that flexibility is excellent for evolving architectures.
Okay, so AWS rewards flexibility and commitment. What's Azure's model?
Azure offers reserved virtual machine instances, which are more traditional. You reserve a specific type of resource.
So less flexible. You're tied to a specific VM size and region.
We are, but it often offers a deeper discount on that specific resource. So it's a trade-off. Flexible commitment on AWS, deep but fixed commitment savings on Azure.
That's helpful. But the single biggest financial differentiator, the real aha moment, has to be the Azure hybrid benefit.
Oh, absolutely. This benefit is a massive built-in financial incentive for enterprise customers. It lets you reuse your existing on-prem Windows Server and SQL Server licenses in Azure.
You bring your own licenses.
You do. And the financial impact of that is enormous.
What are we talking in terms of savings?
Leveraging the hybrid benefit can cut cloud costs for those Windows workloads by up to 40%.
40%, wow.
For a large company running thousands of Windows workloads, the money saved by not relicensing the OS in the cloud is staggering. It can completely alter the total cost of ownership analysis.
Tipping the scales right over to Azure's side. That's a strategic asset AWS just can't easily counter.
It's tied to their ecosystem legacy.
We also have to mention data transfer costs. That's the hidden killer, isn't it?
It truly is. Both charge very little for data entering the cloud, but they charge significant egress fees for data leaving their cloud.
So pulling backups or serving large files directly to users.
Exactly. And while the rates change, the sources consistently highlight that careful management of egress is critical in both. But sometimes AWS's regional transfer costs can add layers of complexity that surprise people.
Okay, we've covered philosophy, the tech translation, and the financial distinctions. Let's summarize this framework for the listener. Based on everything, how should they choose?
You should strongly consider choosing AWS if your application demands the absolute maximum breadth of services, the deepest feature set, and you prioritize a developer-first community focused on cutting-edge innovation.
So if you're building the next big thing from scratch,
That's the sweet spot. AWS is still the platform of choice for building cloud-native, scalable applications from the ground up.
and the decision points for Azure.
Choose Azure if your #1 requirement is seamless integration with an existing Microsoft stack. Active Directory, Microsoft Developer Tools, all of that.
And for compliance.
Yes. You also choose Azure if you operate in sectors with really stringent compliance mandates like government, defense, or healthcare. Azure has made massive focused investments there.
And, tying back to our last point, if your strategy dictates a powerful, integrated hybrid model.
Definitely. If workloads must span your private data center and the cloud, Azure, because of Arc and Stack, is the compelling choice.
It's leveraging existing investment versus maximizing pure technical
I
flexibility.
think that's a perfect way to put it.
Which brings us to our final thought for the day,
Mhm.
the learning curve. If you, the listener, are mastering this ecosystem for the first time, this is a critical part of your time to market.
And here we find a paradox again. Because AWS is structured as those atomic granular building blocks, S3, EC2, VPC, it's generally considered more complex to learn initially.
You're not just learning the services, you're learning how to securely wire every single piece together.
Right. It forces you to be an architect. Azure can have a slightly lower cognitive entry barrier for people already familiar with Windows Server administration.
But that leads to a deep reliance on that pre-existing knowledge. You have to know Active Directory inside and out.
You do. But here's the fascinating twist. Despite AWS's initial complexity, its documentation is almost universally considered the industry gold standard.
That's the scaffolding.
It is. It's so detailed, so thorough, and so focused on explaining those complex interacting systems that while the initial climb is steep, the resources available for mastery are unmatched.
The certifications reflect that too, don't they?
They do. Azure certs often focus heavily on service integration, while AWS certs demand a deeper understanding of fundamental cloud architecture.
So we leave you with this final provocative thought to mull over. Which platform's complexity, AWS's sheer detailed depth, or Azure's deep enterprise integration will most impact your time to market and the long-term success of your application?
And consider where your team's expertise lies and where your existing licenses are sitting, because in the cloud showdown, those institutional assets are often the real deciding factors.
Thank you for diving deep with us.